Karamo Report, pursuing the truth, dissolving the complexities of religion, culture, and politics.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Karamo Report. Today, I will be interviewing Mr. Evan Mulch from United Patriots Alliance from South Carolina. Evan has done a lot of work researching the various organizations that are involved in our government. Oftentimes, we call it conspiracy theorists. But the thing about it is, there are so many organizations who operate in the shadows. They recruit, train, and deploy individuals into our government, whether as elected officials, in education, in entertainment, and media, to coalesce around a singular agenda, which is to move us away from a constitutional republic into global totalitarianism. We are going to delve deeply into the various organizations involved, how they operate, and what we can do as Americans to stop them so we can preserve our children's freedom. Thank you so much, Evan, for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
I'm glad to be here, Christina.
So I want to jump into discussing these various organizations that are involved in training many of our leaders in politics, in business, in society as well, and how these different organizations, specifically starting with the Aspen Institute, can you share with our viewers how they operate and the impact they've had in South Carolina?
Well, the Aspen Institute is a globalist organization based out of Aspen, Colorado. And it was founded as sort of this Freemason type of organization. They call themselves, it's like a brotherhood, sisterhood organization. And they, a few years ago, they decided they needed tentacles in certain states. And one of those tentacles is an organization called Liberty Fellowship that's been based in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And that's actually where I live. And they started, I think, about 20 years ago is when they started. And every year they have fellowship events where they train people. And then sometimes, I don't think all the time, but sometimes these people who are trained are offered the opportunity to go to an Aspen event. And so we saw that recently last year, or maybe it was a year and a half ago, with a senator from the Camden area, Camden, South Carolina, where she was asked to go to a Aspen sort of a camp. And the Aspen Institute is not a Christian organization. It doesn't claim to be anti-Christian, but if you see what it does from a Christian's perspective, it is completely an anti-Christian organization. And if you join the Aspen Institute, though, you are more likely to move up the ladder, whether it be in politics or professional life. It seems like there's more help there for you because they've been working on this for decades, creating organizations.
If I could just interrupt you real quick, their original name was the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies. So to your point, they dropped that out, but please continue.
Yeah. Just like the Lucifer Trust changed its name to the Lucis Trust to avoid the to stop Christians from pointing fingers at them. That's the same thing that happened to the Aspen Institute. But the Aspen Institute has used this Liberty Fellowship organization to sort of try to get our best and brightest young professionals in South Carolina to be part of their organization. And it seems to work very well. They currently have our Attorney General, Alan Wilson, as a member of the Liberty Fellowship, which is the sub-organization of the Aspen Institute. They also have Trey Gowdy, who a lot of people see on Fox News. He's participated in not only the Liberty Fellowship, but also I think he's gone to Colorado to visit the Aspen Institute there and to actually speak at one of their events. And so the list goes on and on of people who have participated in Liberty Fellowship, but it becomes quite obvious sometimes when these people are working together. And that's what I've noticed is that you have these neocon types who cling together on certain issues, and all roads sometimes, not always, but they sometimes lead to the fellows that are part of the Liberty Fellowship, which is in part, they're part of the Aspen Institute.
Yeah, if I want to share this quote from your article with from United Patriots Alliance. I think there's an important quote from a he's deceased now, U.S. Senator Jesse Helms. And this quote is so important. It says, a careful examination of what is happening behind the scenes reveals that all of these interests are working in concert with the masters of the Kremlin in order to create what some refer to as a new world order. Private organizations such as the Council on Foreign Relations, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Trilateral Commission, the Dartmouth Conference, the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, the Atlantic Institute, and the Bilderberg Group serve to disseminate and to coordinate the plans for this so-called New World Order in powerful business, financial, academic, and official circles. End quote. I think that is so important because the way these people operate, as you just talked about, is they find people who they perceive to be up-and-comers in politics and business, in education, and what have you, and then they invite you out to a very prestigious retreat or summit or a meeting or to be a part of an organization, because something very similar, I'm not going to say the name of the organization, happened to me, that I was invited by an individual as I was just getting into politics. At the time, I was one of the spokespeople for the Oakland County Republican Party, and I was going on a show called Let It Rip, which is in Detroit, a Detroit-based show where two Republicans, two Democrats get together, and we basically have a sparring match. And so someone had invited me to be a part of an organization similar to this. And at the time, I thought it was a great idea. I didn't know how the globalist cult operated. But after a further investigation into that organization, I see that Liz Cheney was a board member of that organization. And right there, that was a red flag for me that I in no way, shape, form, or fashion want to be involved with anything that anti-constitutionalist Liz Cheney is involved in. But what happens is that many of these young people who are just getting started in politics, they lack the accurate situational awareness regarding the globalist cult and how they operate. And then they're invited to a prestigious meeting where, the Ford Foundation and the Kresge Foundation and the Rockefeller and all these organizations are funding, and they say, hey, this is where the movers and shakers in society are, so I should go. Little did these people know when they get there, you are essentially entering what I like to call a re-education camp. So it's a functional re-education camp to kind of train you into the globalist way of thinking. That way, as you move up through the system in whatever your respective lane is, whether it's in academia, politics, media, then you are going to parrot the talking points of that re-education camp you've been through, whether it's through the Aspen Institute or another type of organization. What say you, Evan?
Yeah, and I think, Christine, you've read our recent article written by United Patriots Alliance. I wrote the article for our organization, and it targeted the membership that the former Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer has in the Rodell Fellowship. The Rodell Fellowship is another organization, sort of like the Liberty Fellowship. It's a sub-organization of the Aspen Institute. And he was very young when he was brought into it. I think he was in his early 30s. He was an up-and-coming Republican in South Carolina, the lieutenant governor for Governor Mark Sanford. And I think in his second or third year with as lieutenant governor, he must have been recruited by the Rodell Fellowship. And with the Rodell organization, he actually went on a worldwide tour with Kamala Harris. I'm showing this picture because this is a recent picture of them taken just a few years ago where Kamala was visiting Lieutenant Governor Andrew Bauer. And, what they do is they make people like Andre Bauer seem as if they're on the right. And so in the media tells the story, oh, we've got Andre Bauer. Now, Andre Bauer, you may have remembered him from being on CNN a few years ago, but he was the Trump supporter on CNN, and he was supposed to be Mr. Right Wing. But he, in his actions, I can tell you, I've been in politics full time in South Carolina for about since 2011. And so I've been in it, over almost 15 years. I've never seen Andre Bauer anywhere in South Carolina. Now, I have talked to him on the phone, and that's where I learned about his membership in the Aspen Institute, because I was educating him about the conspiracy against South Carolina, and I brought up the Aspen Institute, and he told me, well, that's who I actually have traveled as part of their fellowship, and I got to know Kamala Harris while I was traveling because she was one of the attendees. I think they were in the class of 2005 together. You can actually go to the Riddell Fellowship website and see that. But it's obvious to me they're organized in many different ways, but if you just study each of these organizations, they each seem to have the same goals: destroy those that are pushing true Christianity, those that are actually desiring to protect the property rights and God-given rights of individuals in America.
And I think also an important point that you mentioned about this gentleman being, having this friendship, for lack of a better term, with Kamala Harris, and that's how it operates. They bring these people who claim to be Republican and Democrat, and they have them all participate in a very lengthy fellowship program. And then if anybody's ever participated in a fellowship, you become friends with people and you get to know people. And so some of these people, I don't think are sold out to the globalist cult. I think some of these people, not the gentleman you're referring to in Kamala Harris. I mean, if you look at Kamala Harris' family in India, they were involved in spreading Marxism in India. So she's deep in this stuff. But what I'm saying is some of these people are very naive and do not know any better. And so when they brought into these, what I like to call re-education camps, they're brought to these re-education camps, they're sitting there with their counterpart. And people need to keep in mind is that they profile people. They know who is malleable and who is not. If they detect that you may or may not be malleable, they'll continue to bring you in. They may test you and try you. But then when you're there at this function or gathering and you're meeting with these so-called Democrats they're similar to you. They love America too. And you guys are all being brainwashed together. That's how they all are in lockstep, and they all seem to be friends, because it became very obvious to me what was going on when I was on this show, because we would go in the green room prior to the show, and the other Republican with me and the Democrat were chit-chatting like they were best pals. I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, and then after that, they go on air and argue with each other like cats and dogs. And then after that, they're like shaking hands, like, good job. And that's something began to seem very strange to me. I'm like, these people act like they're friends. What this person is advocating for is a destruction to my liberty. I mean, that's typically why we get so passionate about politics. It's not like we're looking for a sparring match. If I want to do that, I could go play a sport. It's because what this person is advocating for is a direct threat to my freedom. So how can I sit here and break bread with this person and act like they're my best of pals unless we really are, and the whole argument on air or on the internet or where they're there in Congress is all theater in the first place.
Right, and what you're seeing, what you were seeing there with the Democrat and Republican is a fake fight, and that's what they are. I don't know if they're coached to do it or if that's what they naturally do, but they are obviously trying to get people rattled over nothing, so that people think that they have to choose one side or the other. But the side that's often getting ignored completely is the constitutionalist side, the Christian side, because if they actually try to argue against somebody like you, Christina, publicly, or if they take you on the news, or if they announce your name on the news and say Christina Karamo is, and I hope I didn't butcher your last name. I hope I pronounced it. But what they don't do is announce our names in public a lot of times and say that we're the enemies, because they know if they ignore us, they have a better chance of winning. And when they do start fighting us, that's when we win, because the truth is on our side.
The Karamo Report needs you, so please like, share, and subscribe. You can also support this project by making a contribution. We greatly appreciate your support. Now back to the show. Let me ask you this too, Evan. Oftentimes when we discuss these various organizations, and I want to get to some others in a moment, but when we discuss these various organizations, for many people listening, it may become very overwhelming. And as you mentioned, there's the organization and there's all these other subgroups. Why is it so important for people to, quote unquote, go down the rabbit hole when it comes to these various organizations and the people involved in them?
Well, I've been told I focus too much on conspiracies, and it's maybe I do, but I'm the one writing these articles in South Carolina. I think I'm actually explaining the conspiracy against South Carolina better than anybody. But to understand these types of organizations, you just got to look at the past organizations that have acted similarly. I think a good one to look back at is Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones still exists today. It's just not the leading organization like it used to be. they're kind of dying out, I think, from their former role as being, for almost 100 years, of being the leader in the conspiracy in America. Of course, the Council on Foreign Relations used to be very strong as well, and they still are strong, but that's been a leading organization for pushing the globalist antichrist agenda in America. And then they've used an organization called the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, which has members in every state. They have committees in every state. And I have the list of people in Michigan they're actually part of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. It's led by Hank Meyer. He's the executive chairman of Meyer Incorporated. Do you pronounce that Meyer?
Meyer, it's a large grocery store chain here in Michigan, and Peter Meyer was a U.S. congressman. So
Peter was Hank's son, right? And he actually voted to impeach Donald Trump a few years ago, and I think he left right after doing that. But was I correct that was his son?
I'm not sure if it's his son, but it's definitely a relative of his. But I really want to expound on that because I think this is so important, because I know earlier in the conversation, folks here, again, they think I'm sure many of the viewers are from Michigan will think, well, that's South Carolina, it's not Michigan. It's like, oh, yes, it is. Because as you just mentioned, this organization, they have chapters in all the 50 states. And there's a lot of overlap. As you discussed with this organization here, USGLC, what is it? You were telling me earlier, is it 28, I believe you said, of their 50 membership advisory board are
advisory. They have advisory. Members? Yeah, they have advisory members to their national organization. One of those is Hillary Clinton, who is not a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Another one of those is Rick Santorum, and he's part of the fake right. And so Rick Santorum's actually part of that. But 28 of the 50 are members of the Council on Foreign Relations.
And so I think that's why this is so important, because as we discussed earlier for the audience, is that these people will go to these re-education camps or these fellowships or seminars or these various classes, and then they will be taught, and then they will be elected to office. So when I go through the list of the folks in Michigan, I see former congressmen. I see former Michigan Republican Party chair. I see someone who was a former county party chair in the Republican Party. I'm looking at multiple state representatives in the state of Michigan. I'm looking at district chairs for the Michigan Republican Party. I'm looking at individuals who are also involved in the Democrat Party in leadership positions. You're looking at university presidents, university executives. I'm looking at someone on the list who was executive director for the Michigan Republican Party. And the list goes on. Also the Chamber of Commerce. So once again, when these individuals are part of these organizations, they've been trained by these organizations, and they've been deployed. The World Economic Forum does the exact same thing with their young global leaders. So you have all these organizations. It's like a web. It's like a web. And here in Michigan, they have their Gerald Ford organization that they have here, that the folks who are the conservative imposters in Michigan are tied to that organization. So they have this web of all these organizations that intermingle and they overlap. And then, as you kind of said earlier, you get pushback that you focus too much on the conspiracy. And I would disagree with the person making that claim, because the conspiracy is the problem. If people lack accurate situational awareness regarding the enemy we're up against, you're never going to defeat them. And if you have these subversive organizations recruiting and training and deploying people in our government, then we must be aware of who these people are and what these organizations are teaching them. That way we are effectively able to push back against them. Otherwise, we're never going to have our freedom. And I used to think for a very long time, as I've been a Republican my entire life, I was never of any other political affiliation. I've always been a Republican. And I would get so upset when I'm thinking in my early 20s, when I'm watching various Republicans not fighting back against the Democrats, I would get so mad. And I would think to myself, these people are cowards. They lack a spine. Why are they scared? They need to stand up and fight. Then over time, I started to realize it's not that they're scared. It's not that they lack a spine. They are deployed. They were recruited, trained, and deployed, and they're simply following their masters. That is their job.
Absolutely.
Their job is to make the Republican Party nothing more than controlled opposition. We were at one point the party of the Constitution. And I would even say currently, I'm very upset. We have had Republican leadership in Congress for how many months? And what have they gotten done?
Nothing, except they've mostly harmed us. I mean, you have one Congressman, Thomas Massey, who I think is doing just about everything correct. But yeah.
And so to your point, though, and please, I apologize for cutting off, but to that point, it's just so important to emphasize why returning the Republican Party to being the party of the Constitution is so important. The Democrat Party are completely sold out Marxists. So that's so that's it is what it is with that. That's another story in itself. But we are supposed to be the party of the Constitution, and I would assume you would agree with me that we're just simply trying to return the Republican Party to what it's supposed to be, which is the party of the Constitution and protecting and defending our constitutional rights, which are required to preserve and protect us and our kids' freedom.
Well, I have some bad news. The Republican Party was actually never founded on being a constitutionally based organization. What there's been Christians that have tried to convert it to being a constitutionally based organization, which I'm okay with. But the Republican Party, which was founded in Ripon, Wisconsin, was actually founded by communists. And Lincoln ran as a Republican his first time around, but he wouldn't even run as a Republican the second time around because they had turned too much towards the side of Marxism. So he ran, I think, under a third party his second time as president. Now, in the South, we don't agree with Lincoln's invasion of South Carolina, but I deliver a lecture on this. Lincoln was actually likely killed by his administration. What we experienced on January 6, 2021 was likely the same thing that the people experienced when Lincoln was assassinated. It was a Fedsurrection. And the deep state that existed during Lincoln's time is the same sort of demonic deep state that exists in America today. And that's the beauty of understanding. I shouldn't say the beauty. That's the sort of deep understanding you can get when you study the conspiracy. Because a conspiratorial organization like the Bavarian Illuminati that started in 1776, May 1st, which we're coming on to May 1st in just a few days, that is not May Day. That is the birthday of the Bavarian Illuminati, which is sort of this group in Bavaria, Germany, that made an almost perfect illuminous satanic organization that could infiltrate governments, could infiltrate Freemasonry. I'm not saying Freemasonry was good. It was always a substitute church, is what it was. But the Bavarian Illuminati infiltrated Freemasonry to take over France and to kill a large number of Christians in France. And it since has done that in America, but because the Bavarian Illuminati was caught, they simply just changed their names and ran their organizations under different umbrellas. And one of those organizations was Skull and Bones.
You know,
and today,
No, please continue. Please continue.
And today, Skull and Bones has lost a lot of its momentum, but they still have power. There seems to be the same sort of mindset through the Aspen Institute, its sub-organizations, the Rodale Fellowship, the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. They try to offer people a substitute faith for Christianity. And
Evan, I think what's really interesting is that when you look at history, kind of to your point, there's so many subversive entities and organizations that have been involved that you start, as you begin to learn about it, you kind of have to relearn history, for lack of a better term. Like, one of the things that was absolutely horrifying that I learned is that there were many Americans who funded Adolf Hitler. So you have these individuals who funded Adolf Hitler, and then after he wreaks havoc, murders millions of people, then these same individuals are then involved in funding organizations that they claim want to make sure nothing like the Holocaust ever happens again, like the United Nations. So it's like these people we're talking about, they're experts at arsonists posing as firemen. They go set a fire, then they go and want to put out the fire that they set. And when they want to put out the fire, it involves a new world order. It involves a taking of our liberties to remedy the problem that they themselves created. What say you?
Yeah. The state of Israel actually has its own policy where they'll kill their own people to reduce the number of people kidnapped. Anybody can look it up on the internet. That's sort of what's happened all over the world for centuries. And these satanic sort of organizations, they will sometimes kill their own people in order to cause outrage amongst their own people, so their people get more active in growing their cause and pushing their cause.
Yeah.
And what? Yeah.
No, please continue. Please continue.
And I was being nice at one point of talking about how it's just a substitute church for Christianity. You know, these other organizations, they actually have a death culture. And that was part of the culture of the Bavarian Illuminati. It existed with Skull and Bones. All you need to do is study the rituals of Skull and Bones. And then you probably get groups like the Liberty Fellowship and the Rodale Fellowship, where they don't have those intense death culture, sort of, fraternity rituals. But still, there's a guise of a death culture. I think that goes within these, sort of anti-Christian Masonic organizations, where they look the other way when it comes to bombing, thousands and thousands of children in Ukraine, or thousands and thousands of children in some other part of the earth, or the mass addiction Americans have to killing the unborn still, and so there's so much that can't be solved right away, because there's so much organization that worships a death culture, that participates in a death culture, and they have tons of money and power that we as Americans, if we're Christian Americans, and I know you are, it seems like it's David and Goliath all the time, and we're the Davids.
It's to that point. And what do you say to people who go, Evan, I've just heard what you're saying. You sound nuts. You sound crazy. You're telling me that there's a subversive satanic entity that is a death cult that has infiltrated our government and is seeking not just our U.S. government, but governments around the world, and are seeking harm to us. How do you respond to people who say, you sound nuts, man? You sound crazy.
Well,
You guys
go through these people's social media profile and find out how many times they actually spoke out against Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is one that was part of the death culture. We have no idea what happened to all those kids that they were taking to his island, Epstein Island. And we have a massive number of children that are being lost all over America, all over the world. And it seems to be that there's a sort of stranglehold on us that want to know the truth, of us actually finding out where all these children are going. We know that something happened with the children from Haiti when the Clintons went in there and escorted these children out of Haiti after that earthquake. And so simply just do your own research. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it just takes reading a book. Sometimes it just takes talking to a person. I remember my awakening sort of happened when I was watching the Alex Jones. It wasn't an interview, but when he infiltrated the Bohemian Grove a few years ago, and he actually videotaped the satanic ritual where the child was sacrificed to the owl god, and it probably wasn't a real child that was in there, but what's true, though, is there were a lot of the world's elites, a lot of American elites that were at that ritual, and they go there every single summer. There were people, as a Christian, I could never be okay with watching any ritual where there is a fake killing of a child. And that's what our elites have gone to every summer in Bohemian Grove, California, to be part of this ritual. And they're going to have another one this summer. I mean, that's what they do. They have a death culture.
When I first learned about the Bohemian Grove, what blew my mind was that it was people not just from politics, but also media and entertainment. And if you notice that these people seem to be all on message, because I remember during 2020, during the COVID lockdowns, is that on YouTube, you will have these various singers and actors and rappers and beauty influencers all interviewing Dr. Fauci. And then if you read the comments under the videos, that many people were just lambasting these people, because it became increasingly obvious to the citizenry that this is all very coordinated, that all these entertainers are subtly interviewing this guy, asking the same line of questioning, to a point that many of these videos, they just turned off the comments because people were getting so upset. And so naturally, as more and more people began to comment on what's happening, then other people start to read it and start connecting the dots. And if people think, all these things sound so insane, just look at it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was the church investigations in the 1970s, when there was actual congressional hearing regarding the CIA trying to using LSD and other forms of drugs, hallucinogenics, to test them on people to see how they could be used in their operations. Plus, using things like remote viewing and other types of satanic practices that our CIA was actively involved in, trying to see can they be used for the military industrial complex. So this is not insanity. It is insane, but this is stuff people are actually doing. And I think that for the average person to even consider this, it's so overwhelming because they go into such denial, because you hear this and you say, okay, this sounds completely insane. What are you telling me? You all sound insane. And then they have to go into denial, because if they acknowledge what's really happening, then they either A, have to deal with, I got to do something about it, or B, this situation is far worse than what I anticipated. Now I feel like I'm about to completely lose it, because now we have these really scary people in charge.
Yeah. Well, the death culture goes deep. Right now I'm writing an article about how through school choice, schools across America, because school choice is the new thing. The U.S. Department of Education is going to be, ended, and states will finally have control of their schools. That's what they say, right? Mm-hmm. But there's these accreditation programs that have to be attached to the new private schooling. They already are attached to private schools, but basically, the goal of the globalists is to not let any child be on its own with its parents. So they want to do the schooling for every child, in not just in America, but all over the world. And if you study the strategies they have, they're actually involved in MK ultraing children. And how do they do that? Well, they raise this idea that all these children are mentally depressed. And they're mentally depressed because they just don't have the desire to really live like children did decades and decades and decades ago. They don't have the motivation. So they now have to be a little bit drugged. They need a psychiatrist, and they have to be on pharmaceuticals, and then and then the curriculums are curriculums that take away their faith in a life after this life, so they become extremely depressed, and then there's further need for medication. And in reality, that's the globalist education agenda for you. So that's what's at the end of the pipeline for the death culture. And as you know, transhumanism is sort of part of that. And I know we're going a little bit outside the box of what we were originally talking about, but this is something that the Aspen Institute seems to have no concern over. This is something that the Council on Foreign Relations seems to have no concern over. And it's such an obvious thing that's going on in America. And so I often, a saying that's often said in business or whatever type of organization you're in, you know people, if their heart's in it, by how much they care, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, it's always been Christians that have cared the most. They're willing to put, and I'm not saying people who aren't Christian don't do this from time to time. There's moral people that will do this from time to time as well, but they'll lay down their life. They'll sacrifice their life for truth and to help the person that's in need. And that's what more and more of us need to do, because these truths are tough to stomach.
Well, let me say this. When I referenced that quote that you had in your article from Jesse Helms, he's made within that quote, he said, quote, "A careful examination of what is happening behind the scenes reveal that all these interests are working in concert with masters of the Kremlin." I think the part I really want to hone in on is work in concert with masters. He's not saying that the Kremlin is controlling these people. They're working in concert with these people. And so as you made kind of the comment, like, well, we were kind of like going kind of down a rabbit hole, but I think it's relevant in a sense of this is what we're talking about, is that the way they control things, this globalist cult we're facing, is they have these various organizations. They recruit people then they deploy them. So if I have 100 people across America that I've identified as potential political leaders of the future, and I recruit them all and train them on the talking points, I train them on the perspectives, I train them on the policy positions they're supposed to have, you can see how easily a small group of people can control everything. Because if
Yes.
they have all their people deployed in these decision-making roles, then they just have to make sure all their people are in operation. They have their political people who are operating according to the plan. They have their people in media, making sure they parrot the correct talking points, directing the attention of the American people where it needs to be. Then there you have it. I was watching an interview from Russell Brand was interviewing a guy who was discussing the Aspen Institute. And this guy stated that in 2020, the Aspen Institute held a conference on training journalists on how to handle leaks. So it were folks from like the New York Times and all these various, prominent publications that many Americans turn to for their information. The Aspen Institute had these journalists sitting in a class teaching them how to handle leaks, how to steer the conversation. So again, that's how this centralized command and control structure operates. And then these people are business leaders. Like in Michigan, one of the main culprits, the DeVos family, Betsy DeVos, is involved with the Aspen Institute. And that family, they only fund conservative imposters. They only fund people who have a schizophrenic relationship with the Constitution. And they actively work to sabotage patriots. So the fact that these people had just coincidentally seem to have a high concentration of wealth, they just so happen to all be involved in these same organizations. They all seem to fund the same type of politicians, and the same journalists we listen to all are a part of these organizations. Is it so confusing? Is this quote unquote conspiracy too hard to comprehend? It begins to all make sense. And how these people have been getting away with it for so long is the American people are then watching their journalists, their trained entertainers, lull us to sleep and distract us while their folks in business, politics, and education are fast away implementing their agenda.
Yeah, and from a Christian standpoint, we're operating in a spiritual world, right, where there are demons, and sometimes these people probably don't even know they're behaving in a way that's so blatantly obvious. It's so blatantly obvious to us how it's happening, but they're under control of demonic forces that's causing them to behave towards in a way to where they're part of the death culture that Satan absolutely wants in society. And so it does become obvious. I think it's interesting. Jesse Helms was very good friends with Congressman Larry McDonald, and Larry McDonald was one of the passengers killed on that flight from Alaska to South Korea back in 1983. And Jesse was actually on another flight that was going the same. It was actually, I think, just in front of the flight that Larry McDonald was part of. And Larry, if you ever look up an interview that will just cause some excitement in your life, because you can't imagine a guy who was this brave. If you just type in firing, I think it's firing line, or it was with Pat Buchanan. So if you type in Pat Buchanan, Larry McDonald into Google or whatever search engine you use, maybe it's YouTube, and you watch the way Larry McDonald exposed the conspiracy right in front of a guy that was actually a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. That's, to me, I used to watch that over and over and over because I wanted to be like Larry McDonald. And that was actually Larry McDonald's last interview before he took that flight as a commercial airliner, KAL-007.
Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. Well, let's face it, they've dominated the State Department for 40 years, and pretty much openly.
All right, but what are they trying to do?
Well, their objective is to try to bring about a gradual transition in our society, a dissolving of sovereignty, and a moving steadily to the left on the political spectrum. That you are looking at a group that has worked to bring about a dissolution of national sovereignty on the road to world government. And certainly you're familiar with the local professor Carroll Quigley, who has been part of your club, in which he admitted all this. And he said in his book, Tragedy and Hope, the only thing I disagree is that we've worked to keep it a secret. And you see Arthur Schlesinger Jr. writing way back in 1947, says, yes, this is the hidden policy of America. But we can't tell the American public because they're too unsophisticated to see the value.
And here's another conspiracy for you. A lot of us don't think the flight actually crashed. It was actually landed, and then they took the passengers off, and then they probably fake crashed the plane in the ocean after they took the passengers off. So that's the sort of, you have to be willing to ponder thoughts and to maintain, even though they're tough to stomach, to maintain your emotions while figuring out how things have actually happened. And some things that have happened, we may never get to the bottom to. But what I love with what's happening right now is there's people that are wanting to get to the bottom of 9/11. And Tucker Carlson just did that great interview with a former congressman just a few days ago, where the guy is getting ready to reveal names and call out people who have made money in Ukraine and all these other, foreign wars we've been in that we should have never participated in the first place. And but all roads lead to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Aspen Institute. I know these names
United
are probably going to be new to me. And the United Nations.
Let's not leave them off.
Once you understand these organizations, it's so easy to figure them out.
Evan, I think that's the important point. So for folks that are watching this interview and it's like, wow, these guys really kind of went in circles a little bit. No, that we're making a point here is that all these organizations, again, they recruit, they re-educate, and they deploy their people into business, politics, entertainment, and they make sure they pair the talking points. Like I was watching a video that the Aspen Institute produced. And who's up there? A rapper named Common. Now, I don't know what type of music you like, but he's a very popular rapper named Common. Why is Common up speaking at an Aspen Institute conference? So they have their people who that go out and deploy their talking points, and then their job, the entertainers, they're like the Pied Pipers. Their job is to lull the masses in a certain direction while these people institute their agenda in our society. So it's not it's such a crazy thing once you begin to kind of pull back the curtain. And you kind of touched on it earlier with Jeffrey Epstein. And what about Hugh Hefner? A lot of these guys, Hugh Hefner had a magazine that he made where he had Brooke Shields at like 12 years old, completely naked, taking pictures of her. How was that not pedophilia? How did he get away with that? Well, when they're an asset of the deep state, they're the asset of these people. They're running honeypots. They're not going to throw their guys in jail, because when you look into the Jeffrey Epstein story, I mean, this guy was an international sex trafficker and was convicted to serve 18 months in jail, and then 6 out of the 7 days he was out on work release, and he only had to check in prison once a week. Now, if that was anybody else who was a sex trafficker and a pedophile, they would be in jail for probably 50 years. But he was let out. And then the various people involved in his case went on to have high-ranking positions. So we have to just start to ask ourselves, why are then the other side of this coin, right? So we talked about the various organizations, how they recruit, train, and deploy their people in these various influential positions to kind of move things along. But I think the other thing we need to remember is that they recruit, they really, and they have people move up the system. So again, as you kind of mentioned earlier, a lot of the lower rung people involved in these organizations, they're not satanic. They don't know what's going on. They think they're just part of a prestigious organization that's looking to solve world hunger. Okay. They don't know, they're the end from their elbows. Okay. But many of these people who they have identified who have certain depraved tendencies, they move them up. And somebody like Jeffrey Epstein was clearly running a honeypot. And with your experience in politics and mine as well, I know from firsthand observation that they recruit these morally and sexually depraved people because they're easy to control. They're easy to go and do whatever they say, whether they're blackmailing these individuals or whether these individuals just have sincerely psychopathic tendencies, so they can then go usher in the agenda. And so the group they despise is Christians. When you learn about Karl Marx, when he was spreading his filth across Europe, one of the reasons why Marxism was not able to gain a foothold in England was because of Christianity. Right. So the more the gospel of Jesus Christ grows in our public square, now us pivoting to solutions, We can talk probably for the next 3 hours about all the various people and the various organizations and the Helena Blavatsky's and the Luciferian and the Lucius Trust, where they they had Lucifer in their title before. We can go all on these organizations. But the ultimate solution to this is the spreading of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And if the gospel of Jesus Christ is spread, and you have more Christians willing to displace evildoers, and more Christians willing to serve God in the public square, and more Christians willing to go out and share the gospel and let people know what's happening, then we are in a position to actually displace these subversive organizations. What say you?
Yeah, sharing the gospel is declaring that the kingdom has come. I mean, the kingdom of Christ is here. To enter it, you must follow Christ. You must be baptized. You must follow, his teachings. And so the more and more we declare that, the better off everybody is, because then you have access to eternal life, which is a very reassuring thing, given the circumstances that Christ has conquered death, and death is either going to be a place where you're with Jesus Christ and the Father, or you're going to be in a place that's far away from God. But it's important to do that. But as Christians, we've got to let the Holy Spirit does what it's supposed to do, and we can't allow satanic forces to neutralize us when we see evil, and when we see that there's organizations that are doing evil. We should not be quiet. We should be willing to do as much as we can to expose that evil, even if it means sacrificing our lives in the process. And I see it all the time where people are willing to go to a unconstitutional, unwinnable war and sacrifice their lives for the benefit of the neocon Republicans or neocon. The Democrats are also neocons too a lot of times, but it's they'll go sacrifice their lives for globalist forces, but they won't go to their city council meeting to speak against Agenda 21, or they won't go to their county council meeting to speak for our right to use our arms the way we want to. They won't take the time to read the Constitution, which takes 24 minutes to read. They won't go do a Constitution course to take 8 hours to learn what the Constitution actually means, which is based on biblical understanding. And so there's all these things that we as Christians, if you are a Christian, you can't stay in this box of only going to church on Sunday. There's so many things you have to do outwardly as you see evil taking place. At that abortion mill down the street, abortions are being done. What are you doing to stop the abortions from taking place? At your local elementary school, kids are being told by the psychologist they need to be put on Ritalin and other pharmaceutical medications. What are you doing to try to stop those kids from being put on pharmaceutical medication? What are you doing to stop these young kids from being vaccinated? If a family's poor and they have to go to the public health department for vaccinations, it's usually heavily encouraged that their kids take all the vaccinations, and a lot of times they'll be caught up all at once, where they have to take a bunch of vaccinations, way more than what the schedule requires, just to catch up on the schedule. So what are you doing as Christians to stop that from happening? Because it's happening. Mm-hmm. I mean, our children are being destroyed. And I know there's a lot of good parents out there that are protecting their kids more than ever, and their kids are becoming patriotic constitutionalists at the age of like 11 or 12 right now. I've seen it. I saw a young man a young boy that's 10 years old last night, and he knocks on doors for campaigns now, and he does it with his mom, of course, but he's being trained by his mom to be a patriot. And so there's some positive things happening right now. So what kind of Christian are you going to be? The neutralized Christian, or the Christian that lives with the Holy Spirit and goes out outwardly to other places where there's evil, and you're not afraid of being killed for telling the truth, or being a patriot that defends the soil that you live on?
It's we as Christians, either we're going to fight these people now, or we're going to fight them later, because there's going to be we're going to fight them. And I'm not saying literal hand-to-hand combat, but what I am saying is it's only going to get worse. Because if you look at, and I encourage everyone, one, you should be reading your Bible all the time, but please review the book of Acts. There's a story in the book of Acts where the apostles were going about and they saw a girl who was possessed by a demon. And these men were using this girl to basically make money from her, not in a prostitution. The scripture didn't say that, but I'm saying to, whether it was fortune telling or other things that she was doing. She had a demonic spirit in her and they were using that demonic spirit in her to make money. And so one of the apostles called the spirit out of the girl. And when they did that, then the individuals who were making money from her got extremely angry and want to kill them. And so those people in that area, I apologize for not remembering exactly. I want to say it might have been Corinth, I believe. I can't remember. But the people of this mob got so angry because they were challenging Artemis. And they were getting so angry with them for challenging their false god and just attacked them. And they did not care. And my point in saying this is that when they had to do spiritual warfare, they did not back down, knowing it would cost them everything. All of the apostles were martyred except for John the Revelator. And you look at the early church, they were willing to lay it all on the line to spread the gospel and displace evil, because our focus isn't just combating with these evil people for the sake of combating. There are souls on the line. There are people that they're looking to drag to hell with them. And we have to do everything we can to stop it. Plus, we have to stop human suffering. We see many examples through our scripture where God commands us to. And just out of good sense, like you said, defend the soil you live on. And I can speak for you in saying this, that we love our country. We love our nation. We love the Constitution, and we love what America can be. But unfortunately, our country is in the hands of these very evil people in many regards, because Christians have been asleep at the wheel. And some of it has just been so successfully concealed from us because these individuals have infiltrated the church. Evan, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe your article, I think it was about USLGC. It was referencing a particular individual who they were defending him and citing this man as a Christian. I can't remember the detail, but he was a Christian radio show host, from what I recall in the article you written. So I apologize if I put you on the spot here. But the reason why that's relevant, because many of these individuals involved in these organizations, they will tell you that they are Christian. They will swear up and down. At least if I could think of one person who was the former Ottawa County chair prior to the folks that are in now, who was a part of the US GLC. He's a part of it. And he was a county chair, and that guy would tell you all day of the week he's a believer in Christ. So
that guy, you're talking about, in my article is written about Tony Beam. Now, Tony Beam, there's a Christian radio station here, which he's been one of the anchors for a very long time. He's very politically involved. And what he does is he stalls the true Christians. When they get involved in politics, he tries to get them to go his way. If they don't go his way, he gets in their way, he stalls them. And he and his small group of other, it's criminal what they do, really, because they're using Christianity as cover as they're neutralizing patriots. And so they're traitors, and they're the ones that help Lindsey Graham. And so those are the type of people we have that are part. Tony Beam's been a member of the USGLC, U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, and he works hand in hand with Lindsey Graham and the other Lindsey Graham Republicans in the state, while portraying himself as this outspoken Christian who's, I guess he also has a position of honor at the Southern Baptist Convention too. But he, what I like to see is I see people get into politics and they go, oh, well, Tony Beam's somebody I can trust. And then after a few weeks, Tony Beam's working up against them, and they're calling me and they're going, hey, Evan, why is Tony Beam picking the other side on this? I'm like, well, because he works for Lindsey Graham. He's on the same side as Lindsey Graham. So obviously, if you weren't going to take his side, he was eventually going to work against you.
And that's, the reason why I'm snickering, and I apologize, because this is part of the problem. And I apologize. I forgot to mention that the pastors that these folks recruit, because they have, I'm trying to be mindful of my words here. Because there are some quote unquote pastors in Michigan who I think are going to be in hell. And I say that I believe they're going to be in hell because they seem to continuously serve Satan and his minions. And they obstruct Christians who are real disciples of Jesus Christ as we try to displace evildoers while they enable evildoers. I've seen it
100%.
continuously. And these are the people who I have to constantly pray and to repent for a lack of forgiveness towards these people, not because I have some personal vendetta, but because when you carry the label Christian, there is a
Amen.
certain level of expectation of your behavior and who you stand for. When I say I'm a Christian, I mean that seriously. And it is not that we, just going to gloss over the Marxists in the Democrat Party. The Marxists in the Democrat Party, they already have openly professed and sold themselves out to Satan. They don't care. But these people in our party will claim to be Christian and use that claim of Christianity to gain our trust so they can effectively be wolves in sheep clothing. What say you?
And that's why I do with United Patriots Alliance. If you read our news articles, we call out everybody that we believe needs to be called out. We of course could use more writers because there's so much to expose, but we try to go after the key issues that'll explain to the patriots in South Carolina why things aren't going their way. Because the deep state is so organized, they use some of the most vocal pastors. And these pastors will neutralize you when they see that you're a patriot Christian. And so I just ask everybody that's watching this, go to UnitedPatriotsAlliance.com, click on the news section, and read our articles. Because what happens in South Carolina, I don't think it's ground zero. Now, I do think that Michigan and South Carolina are very similar to what's, there's very similar things going on. But each state has its own flavor of deep state, really. Although I would say, I think in South Carolina, Michigan, it's probably much stronger than most other states.
Yeah, that's something I've been trying to explore, why our states seem to be highly targeted. You would think, places like California, which are heavily targeted, but they're heavily co-opted, and it's happening everywhere. I don't have the answer as to why our states seem to be so heavily targeted. I don't have that answer, and that's something I really want to get to the bottom of because it's terrifying. But Evan, I thank you so much for your time, but I do want you to have the final word. I would like to know, what are some final thoughts that you have for believers that are listening who are just like, what you guys are saying some things that just sound really nuts to me. It's like, this is too much. I can't take it. I just want to go to my Lincoln dinner, get my chicken and potatoes with rosemary on there, and I just want to listen to my nice congressman talk. I don't want all this you guys are saying. What would you say to that person there who just can't take this?
Well, it's okay to take breaks. But if you're being told, if you believe that you need to stop what you're doing and no longer be a patriot, that's exactly what Satan wants for all of us. He wants us to give up the fight because the battle looks too hard, it's too complicated, there's not enough allies, and he wants us to give up. And so if that's your attitude, I would say invest more time in prayer and invest more time in connecting with God. Because over the past 2,000 years since the church was started, those that have connected with God, that have been closest to Him, they have been the bravest, most courageous people. That's why Christianity is grown to what it's grown to all over the world. And there are some brave Christians in South Carolina, same in Michigan, but even in other parts of the world that we've never been to. We can't even imagine what they've been through. They are living with the same courage that the original disciples and the original apostles had. And all we have to do is we got to look at the examples of what Christ has done for us, what the apostles did for us, and what Christians continue to do for us. If we look at those examples, we'll find inspiration to keep going. And I don't think Christians should really consider retirement at this point. I think Christians need to go forth. And if you retire from your job and you have enough money, okay, well, you've got that income coming in, but fight for your country, fight for the children and grandchildren and all the future offspring to where they will not have to live under the globalist foothold. And part of the globalist foothold is already here. So if you don't think it's here yet, you're obviously not paying attention. We every day, I have to, just with my own family, I'm concerned all the time about what we're participating in, where we go, because almost everywhere you go, the globalists have something in there that's trying to pull you out of being a Christian patriot.
Thank you so much, Evan, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Christina.
I hope you enjoyed the interview today with Mr. Evan Mulch. My request is that you investigate the claims that we've made on this program. Do not take anyone's word for anything without first investigating it for yourself. There are so many competing forces within our society that are running directly opposed to Jesus Christ, and we must be aware of the schemes of Satan. The Bible tells us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and support our show at theKaramoReport.com. God bless.